Richard Giannotti, welcome to the Transition Podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for coming on. It's been a long time since I see you, but I do follow you on social media. You still look young and healthy and strong.
Follow you guys too, but I think we all got a little more gray hairs.
We do have a little more gray hairs. So how old are you now?
37.
I'm 40, bro.
That comes at you fast, doesn't it?
It does. But you know what? I still feel like I'm 21. And I actually Peloton this morning. I felt great. And I still work out, trying to stay in shape, trying to hang with, I tell some of my friends that I see, dude, you know, you gotta stay in shape, dude. I'm not, you know, we're gonna fight gravity, bro. For
You have to, and chasing kids around always helps, you know.
No doubt. So, how is life treating you, man? It's
great. You know, I recently married.
Congrats.
Thank you. I have a little stepson who's 5 and a baby on the way. It'll be my first. So
you have a baby and you have a 5-year-old now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Olivia is now 9, my daughter, and Sean is 7, and I'm done, dude.
It's expensive down here in South Florida. I have a farm, you know?
Yeah, I know, and I love kids, and you love the whole thing about it. It's just playing defense is it's tough. And having a girl and having a boy for me is challenging because, you know, like my daughter plays sports, my son plays sports. Sometimes they're like at the same time, and it's like, what do you pick? And then your daughter's like, you know, I'm leaning more towards baseball. My daughter's playing soccer, and but anyhow, man, no, the kids. It's funny. Having a conversation last night after my son's baseball game, and I feel like my kids teach me sometimes. Like, you know, you think you're out there and you're teaching them and whatnot, and when you hear their feedback to what they're experiencing, it's a constant reminder that they're a blessing, man, and they're teaching you.
I think they teach through their innocence, right? Because a lot of times as adults and athletes, like, the stress is so much sometimes that we forget about what life was like when the best part of the baseball game was your drink ticket or the Rice Krispie treats after the game or putting stuff on. And so, you know, that's I think we can learn a lot through kids. Just because, you know, they might be young doesn't mean we can't learn anything.
There's no doubt. So last night we played this team, right? And we lost the baseball game. We have a pretty decent team. But our kids are learning, and you know, if you're following Little League Baseball now, like my son just made a real big jump to like a new park. It's super competitive and whatnot. And we have this organization called Blueprint. It was actually started by Carlos Salausa. You may have played with Carlos.
I remember the name, man.
Played at Louisville for a little bit, and then he played at transferred to Barry. And then his little brother played at Vanderbilt. But long story short, our approach has been more about the mental process, and it's a team built on families. It's not a team built on who the best player is, and there's kind of like there's this whole artificial market out there. We can talk about that too, but long story short, our kids competed, and man, like last night we hit the ball, and it was like right at everybody, and you're looking at it as a coach, you're like, man, we're doing everything right. We're putting the ball in the barrel, and the kids are just making plays. And for the first time ever as a dad, I was like, man, I'm a little frustrated because I caught myself being a little bit more result-oriented, you know? And I was internalizing it. And then I realized after the game, my son's like, hey, Dad, you want to go play Pokemon when we get home? And I'm like, this is what this is about, man. Like, he was out there. He had an amazing time. He competed, but he didn't give a shit whether or not he won. He lost. If I asked Sean what the score was, he wouldn't have a clue.
Because that's now, mind matters, right? At that age, it's about being out there, and I think as adults, we forget about that sometimes.
We do, man. If there's one thing that I try now, it's an effort, it's a conscious effort that I'm making is, you know, it's like business, right? I'm one of the things that I try to imply in myself, and I think it helps me in every category of my life is just continue to have fun, bro. And it's tough sometimes because sometimes we're men, we're husbands. You carry this weight, and I think it's natural. And you feel you kind of feel like you're on your own sometimes, and you're not, man. And I think sometimes having that ability to go back and remember when we were kids and you were at Miami and I'm at FIU and like, I just want to get drafted, or you're in high school, I'll play for free.
Yep.
Literally, I would say those words, I will play for free. And it just showed you how much we love the game of baseball, and you just wanted a shot to put on that uniform. You got to play at the prestigious University of Miami. I got to play at a great school like FIU, and then it became about the minor leagues, and you just wanted to put on a uniform, get out there, experience the crowd, experience the environment, the grass, the smell, your boys. Mm-hmm. And there's times when things get rough and challenging, I kind of like, I go back sometimes, Richard, and you'd be surprised, man. I'm going back in my mind and I just tell myself, man, remember when you wanted to play for free? Remember when it was pure?
That's what I think the most important thing with baseball is what it teaches you. What we don't realize in the moment is how strong you really are mentally just to get on a day-to-day basis to deal with failure, right? And so to me, you always hear the quotes like you always have to keep failing forward, right? But I always kind of live by like, you never learn, people never became great by getting it right all the time. You learn through failure. And so kind of like what you're saying is like, especially when it comes to kids, is they haven't had a lot of failure in their life. And so that innocence kind of sets in and they can just enjoy and learn and grow. And sometimes as adults and former athletes and even athletes when you're still playing is, like we were talking about earlier, you suppress it, you push it aside, and then all of a sudden it just creeps up, and then it explodes on you. And when it explodes on you, that can be a really troubling time. And you probably go through more of those explosions as you play longer and longer in professional sports. And then the epitome of your podcast, the transition, that's the eruption, right? And so with the eruption, it's a scary time. It's self-evaluation. It's honest self-evaluation, which is probably the most important part of that statement, because a lot of times in baseball we've been told we're so good, or you have to get over your 0 for 4s that turn into 0 for 8s that turn into 0 for 12s, and somehow you have to trick yourself like, oh, today's going to be the day I figure it out. And the reality is a lot of people don't sympathize with that or understand it, maybe because they just look at you as an athlete and like, oh, shut up, you get to play sports. But it's a mental mindfuck. And so what happens is unless you know how to harness that and deal with the failure, you're never going to fail forward. You're just going to fail in place. And so having control of your mind, and I think you probably realize it now more going through what you went through, me as well, is failure's okay. Like I don't accept failure. I understand failure. And I understand that if I use it in the correct manner, that it can help me become better, come out on the other side more experienced, and so on and so forth.
No doubt. I mean, what you said resonates with me tremendously. We're going to fail, right? I'm really good friends with Raul Ibanez, and Ibanez always, I love him. Raul's always telling me, he's like, Fern, we're never failing. We're constantly learning. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think during my transition, and anybody's transition who really wants to truly transition, is that you start to realize that you have to fall in love with the process. And it's something that we talk about repetitively. If you listen to my podcast, it's always the same thing, but it's like you have to like implement that new thought process, because a transformed mind is the most powerful thing a human being has. But it takes work and it takes effort. And you get there sometimes by bumps and bruises, man, getting punched. Let's go back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your baseball playing days, where you play ball at, and your transition when how that happened.
Sure. So, I'm a Fort Lauderdale guy. So coming up, we had a lot of rivals with you guys. Mm-hmm. Summer leagues with the Bombers and the Pokers and us at Sunrise and stuff like that. And really competitive in South Florida. I think we came up in a time where baseball was a lot of prospects everywhere in Broward and Dade. And, I went to St. Thomas Aquinas, I went 4 years there. And I signed a scholarship to go to the University of Miami. But if I kind of back up a second, because I know probably a lot of kids are watching this, I was a really good athlete. I played multiple sports. I played football. I played ice hockey. My family's all originally from the Northeast.
You played ice hockey?
Mm-hmm. I was a big hockey player. I started skating at 4 or 5 years old. My parents had skates on me from a little kid, even growing up in South Florida. And that was actually my best sport. And so when I got to the point where I got to high school, an opportunity came up to go to a private school in Minnesota for a prep school. and it was called Shattuck St. Mary's, which was one of the more prestigious ones. I'm sure I would have had an awakening, but playing and travel, like we would travel all across the country, and we played teams from Canada, teams from Russia, everything like that. And so you get to see a lot of the best playing. But as life goes on, you have to start making tough decisions. And so I was 15 years old, and I had a scholarship to go to this prep school, and they told me I couldn't play baseball or football anymore. And so even though I think hockey might have been my best sport at the time, I wasn't ready to make that decision and give up the two other sports. And so I decided first decision and major decision in life was not to move to Minnesota at 15, which is like crazy decision to have to make it that young. But I think that decision prepped me for what I was going to experience a couple years later with going through the draft. As a 17-year-old kid, I wouldn't have even have been able to sign my contract. My parents would have had to sign it because I was a minor, because I was young for my grade.
You were the baby in your class, huh?
Yeah, I was a baby. And so what happens is that draft day comes along, and I've had two very different experiences with the draft. And I think it's relatable to a lot of kids because it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows, right? And so when I came out, my senior year, I didn't even play my junior year of high school because I just finished playing JV, my sophomore year. St. Thomas Aquinas is like a
big time program.
So if you're a sophomore, you don't really play on varsity until you're junior, senior. And I had a great sophomore year on junior varsity. Led all the categories. And so I come in, and our coach leaves to take a job with the Colorado Rockies. New coach comes in, and for whatever reason, he just wouldn't give me an opportunity. And I literally got 13 at bats my junior year. I mean, I remember I used to come home and lose my mind just hitting out into the net in the backyard. And thankfully, I had a really supportive mother and father. My dad was a former player, played in college, all that stuff. And so he understood the mental side.
So your really junior year at St. Thomas Aquinas, you got 13 at-bats.
Mm-hmm. 13 at-bats. And then a lot of my friends were like, oh, you're going to transfer out? And for me, it was like, no, this is where I've always wanted to play. This is where all my friends are. This is what's going to make me better, and I'm going to come out of this on the other side. And so, fast forward to my senior year, I end up having a great year. First team All-State. We go to the state finals game, and now all of a sudden, this I signed with the University of Miami. I have pro scouts coming in, and so it was like everything in a vacuum just coming all to a head at once. And so now they're wanting to know, oh, what would you sign for, this and that. So coming out, I was a straight A student. I had academic and baseball scholarship to go to my favorite dream school, which was Miami. And so there's a lot I didn't understand about the college because obviously I hadn't been in it, but I know I wanted to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. But there was also this aspect that was looming, do I sign? And so I remember talking with all the teams and talking with advisors at the time and trying to gauge like what it would take financially to get me to forego that experience at Miami. And so we kind of went into the draft with a pretty high dollar amount in mind. It was back in 2001, so the draft was way different. And I remember the Marlins calling in like the third round and saying, hey, we're going to take you in the fourth round or the fifth round. Will you sign for, like $200,000, $275,000? And I was like, I had developed a really good relationships. I think Avila was there at the time, and I forget. And so I just wanted to be honest with them and Pepe and all those guys. I said, listen, I think at this point where we are in the draft, I'm going to go to school. And so I kind of made that decision. I remember I couldn't even eat breakfast in the morning. I had butterflies because I didn't expect all this. It just kind of came out.
Well, I mean, you went from having 13 at-bats to becoming an all-state player, signing at the University of Miami when Miami was really good, number one in the country. And now you're experiencing your agents and Major League Baseball. And it's just great for parents who are listening to us who have their kids are in this position because it's not an easy experience for a 17-year-old kid. And I'm sure your mom and dad really played a role in trying to balance your mindset and how do you and even them, they must have felt the stress.
Totally, I'm sure.
But they're going to hide that, right?
My dad was a government spy for his whole career, so we could never read him. He was like Jack Burns from Meet the Parents, so he was always calm, cool, collected. But yeah, my mom, I'm the only son in an Italian family, so I was a little bit of a mama's boy. So I'm sure she was stressing out. But no, they did a great job. You know what they did a great job of? They did a great job of giving me all the tools, the information, the resources, and letting me make the decision I wanted to make. Right? I didn't feel pressure from my parents. No, you need to go to school, or no, you need to sign. Like, they let me make the decision. And I think, as parents, and obviously with kids in my house too, like, I think that's huge to empower your kids with that opportunity, because you have to let your kids fail, right? We talked about it earlier, because that's the only way they're going to learn sometimes. Obviously, you don't want them to fail hard where they just explode, but
No doubt.
you need to let them do that. And so my parents did that. I decided to I told everybody at that point in the draft, I'm going to go to school. So I went out to summer ball practice that day with some of our mutual friends like Tommy Calero and guys like Tyler Green and Luis Palmisano and all those guys that we know very well. And I remember
Tommy
practicing.
Calero, dude.
Yeah, that's my guy.
I had a great time with the White Sox. Tommy hit the ball into no man's land, dude.
He would whirly bird everything.
Big boy.
Yeah. So we would, I remember being at practice, and Charlie Gonzalez came over, and he's like, hey, Rich, come over here. I got to talk to you. And so I was like, hey, what's up, Charlie? Developed a good relationship with him. And he's like, I got somebody on the phone. And he goes, it was Brian Sabian, the GM of the Giants at the time.
Wow.
And so he's like, he wants to talk to you. We just drafted you in the 20th round. And I said, well, Charlie, I'm not going to sign. I'm sorry you wasted a pick. And he's like, just talk to Brian. So I got on the phone, and these guys have done all their homework. They've been scouting everything.
So you had a call from the Marlins to take in the third round.
Mm-hmm.
You say,
no,
I'm going to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're not even thinking about it, and the Giants still take you in the 20th.
Yeah, I mean, back then the draft was different. Everybody
no doubt,
and players,
yeah,
and so have the rights. And so I remember talking with Mr. Sabian, and just the coolest conversation in the world. And to hear somebody at his level just speak so highly of you and your character and your game made me feel really good. And he said, listen, we drafted a guy in the second round out of LSU, and we don't think we're going to sign him, so we're going to have a lot of money to throw around. Now, the draft was different back then, and
you could do that.
College, right? After the 10th round, you could throw millions of dollars at guys just as long as you get them in. And so I said, well, okay. And so we negotiated all summer. One of the most fun summers I've ever had, like summer ball, playing against Bombers, the Twins, every guy that I ended up playing with in college. And I remember just negotiating back and forth, and it got really intense right to the beginning of school, because I went to UM, I moved into my dorm, we're doing initiations, but until you go to your first class Monday morning, they want to make sure. So I remember
Espy was telling me about that. He went through the same thing. He said, I can't walk into a classroom, dude, or this, my contract is done.
Yeah, Espy, a really good friend of mine. We lived together in pro ball for a bunch of years. We're still friends to this day. And so same kind of experience he had. Greg Lovelady, who was like a Miami legend, right?
Of course.
An amazing coach, is up at Central Florida now.
He's at UCF?
He's at UC, is the head guy at UCF. And so he was just finished playing the year before I got in, played a brief stint, I think, with the Marlins, and then got into coaching as the GA at Miami. He was tasked to make sure we all went to class. And so I remember he showed up knocking on my dorm room at like 7:45 in the morning, being like, hey, I'm here to make sure you go to class. And so I ended up talking with the Giants the night before. We got pretty close to that number that I would have signed. But ultimately, I think I was already committed mentally to go to Miami. I'd already started kind of getting acclimated, the organization, the coaching staff, which I fell in love with, and the facilities,
Yeah.
And so I ended up going to Miami, and then 3 years later, one thing that was important to me was obviously education. So I went into Miami with credits, and my plan was, even though this is my dream school and I'm going to learn a lot here, like, this is a stepping stone for me to get to the next level. And that's a mentality that I think is very important to have, is to have a plan, right? It's not that I was trying to just stay at Miami with a mindset of, I'm just using this program to do this. No, it was, I have a plan. My plan is to play here 3 years. My plan is to take 30 credits every year, so that when at my junior year comes up, I'll only have like 6 or 7 classes to graduate.
So 15 credits a semester.
15 a semester, stay on track, and that way that if I ever want to finish up in the off season, that it'll be a lot easier. And so, I think it's good to have a plan going in. I fell in love with the city of Miami. I grew up coming down here all the time. I'm 35, 40 minutes north of here, and I fell in love with the coaching staff and the players I played with, and the relationships and experiences you get to experience, going to Omaha twice and competing at such a high level. But I think what the best thing Miami did for us was they'd allowed us to compete against each other, right? And so you have the best of the best coming in. I mean, listen, we squared off all the time against FIU. FIU is every bit of a program as Miami. We might have a few extra arms in the pen or maybe a few extra bats, and, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, you guys, we all played against each other, and so we always had huge rivalries, right? And so
And it was fun.
it was so much fun. And so coming out of that, you know, 3 years go by, and so I had a crazy experience of not expecting anything in the draft out of high school to having a really good career at Miami and meeting with every team saying, hey, you're a 2 to 5 guy. You're not quite a first rounder, but you're going to go in that 2 to 5 range. But I had some injuries. And so I had 2 surgeries my sophomore year, which weren't, you know, major injuries. But
What happened in your sophomore year?
I tore my meniscus in a practice, and then I tore I separated my shoulder just on a freak play.
What was that like?
So that was
because that's a setback in some way.
Yeah. So, and especially me being a speed guy, you know, that I bounced back no problem. But it was stressful because that happened the week before Florida State series.
Wow.
And so
I know that's a huge rivalry for you guys.
It's the biggest.
It's the biggest series for you guys.
Yeah. And so, you know, that kind of set me back. But, you know, I had surgery 3 weeks later. I was back playing. I think as young guys, you bounce back a little quicker. And then I ended up having a really good sophomore year. And then I was playing with a dislocated shoulder that before my sophomore year, in an inner squad, I rounded second base. The left fielder threw behind, and when I went to go turn, I lost my footing and I fell at an awkward angle, dislocated my shoulder before the season started. So I was playing the season with like a shoulder that's come out a couple of times. Then I do this to my knee, and so you kind of get tagged like injury prone. And you know that probably ended up being the case because I suffered a lot of injuries in my professional career too. But just the mental side of it, you know, I went into the draft my junior year thinking I'm going to go in the second to fifth round, and I'm going to start my career. This is everything that I had planned out, and I'll still be 20 years old, so I had age on my side because I was young for my grade. And I remember going to my parents' house. It's back when it's almost like dinosaur age. You open up your laptop and you listen. You can't see anything, and you hear them calling in your number. And I remember the first 10 rounds
That's
went by.
that's how I got drafted.
So the first 10 rounds go by, and my name doesn't get called. I met with every single team in Coach Morris's office. They say 2 to 5 rounds. I was crushed, emotionally devastated, because this dream, this plan that I had, that I did it to the nines, just got completely ripped out from under me. I remember closing the computer up. I was upset. I literally called our strength coach at Miami, and I went down to Miami and had to get a workout in, and I started preparing my mind. I'm going back for my senior year. I'm going to prove all these people wrong. I don't know what happened. And then that night, the Angels called, and they said, hey, listen, what's it going to take to sign you? And Mike Silvestri, who's one of my favorite people, you know, he goes, Mike, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I'm pissed off, and I'm not going to sign. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to finish my degree and try to go the Khalil Green route, you know? And, you know, which is kind of lofty because what that guy did was amazing. One of the best college hitters I've ever seen. And so he said, listen, we love you. We want you. You know, the draft's different. You know, we'll give you, you know, we'll pay for your last year of school, and we'll give you like top 10 round money if you sign. Do you care what round you get drafted in? And I was like, no. I was like, just as long as I have, you know, financial obligations from your end, which offer me a safety net. And so even though it was like not compared to what I was hoping to get, it offered me an opportunity with somebody that really wanted me. And, you know, that you know, started my career.
And that's when you signed your junior year.
Correct. Literally 2 days after Omaha, flew home. We just got eliminated, flew home, packed up my stuff, and I was in Utah 2 days later.
That's right.
Which is where we played against each other in that league.
At BYU, right?
Yeah, that's where our team was.
So you were there with Sean.
So when I got there,
and I was waiting. I remember you guys being in Omaha because I signed that year. That was my senior year, and I get sent to Great Falls, Montana. And I know that Adam Ricks has signed with the White Sox. So I was watching you guys in Omaha from our clubhouse, knowing that Rixie was going to come. And I think Donnie Lucy was our catcher back then.
Stanford?
He was at Stanford. And I think Donnie, was Stanford in the World Series that year?
I can't remember if they were in. I feel like they might have been in.
Yeah, so we had some players. Then we had a guy named Chris Kelly who was at Pepperdine, and I don't think they were there, but that's how this whole thing started. And then, you know, then I started working out at University of Miami when Ricks was in town. He invited me to go into the weight room and hit. And it's just going back, it's just an amazing experience what this game has done from a relationship standpoint, man. It's just so important. You know, SP was on here last week talking about his friends, and that's the one thing that baseball, this game and in any sport, you build relationships and memories, man, that are forever. So
it's the best. I still keep in touch with all those guys, Danny and Paco and Braun and Jay and SB, all those guys, Cesar Nicholas, because we all ended up. You have such rivalries with guys. Like, I'll tell a perfect example is Patrick Osborne. He's one of my closest friends.
Wow.
We didn't really like each other in college because he played at Florida. He was All-American. We had a big rivalry, but then we ended up playing against each other and then with each other, and so you end up growing to love people. And so I think
we're all athletes, man. And you know how it is when you're in college and you're playing at Miami. You have your swag. You have your. There's this. I get it.
It's part of it, man.
That's
the baseball mentality too. Is you deal with failure at such a high rate, right? I always use the analogy, I'm sure you've heard other people say it, is you fail 7 out of 10 times, you hit 300, you're an all-star and everybody loves you, right? But you fail that extra time out of 10 and you don't have a job. So because you hit 200 versus 300, right? And so
100.
the mental capacity to deal with the failure, number one, to be able to hit 300 and still think you're good and confident by your failing 7 times, to failing that 8th time and not even having a job. I mean, that's like paralyzing. And so I think you lean on a lot of those relationships in the locker room because we spend so much time
together.
It's not like football where you're in with your positional guys most of the time and then maybe an hour for like team workouts. Like, we have a game at 7, right? We're at the field at 1. We're working out, we're eating, we're hitting in the cages, we're doing whatever, playing cards, and then you go stretch and throw and BP and then strap it up at 7 o'clock. And, you're there till 11, and then we're going to come back and do it again for the next
Babe, when you listen
days.
to this podcast, now you understand that I'm not crazy. I was just telling her yesterday, I'm like, man, because Sean's game was at 7, right? So I found a way to get him to hit off the tee my kid's 7 years old, right? I was like losing yesterday. At 4:30, we're going to have the tee. We're going to do some front toss, and you're going to shower, because I used to shower before the game. And I was just telling her, my day started at noon. At noon, you were in the weight room. At 1:30, you grab some grub, play a little ping pong, 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, early batting practice. And it's a lifestyle, man. And it's so much fun. Mm-hmm. It's so much fun. So you're with the Angels. When did your career come to an end there?
So with the Angels, I played about 4 years, and then I got released.
Okay.
Out of spring training, and it was a complete shock to me. I went in. I understand it now, being on this side of the game and understanding how the business side works. But I went into spring training, and I absolutely bawled. I should have been in. I was going to go to like AAA that year, and so it was a complete shock to me. But then it started being like a numbers game. They had just drafted other guys, and then they got free agents, and then they needed insurance plans, and so I started really. I got released. I got picked up right away with the Cardinals. I played a year and a half with the Cardinals, and then the same thing kind of happened.
Oh, so you got picked up?
I got picked up right away.
Okay.
And which was, I guess very fortunate because everybody's cutting, not adding at that time.
I wasn't released, but indirectly I thought I was.
Yeah.
Kind of with the feedback I got from the organization. I had the best spring training I could have ever had. And I think I was playing the best baseball I had been playing in a long time. I was loose, I was hitting the ball. And yet, right when I thought, okay, now this, I'm going to go to high A ball, double A ball, something's going to happen. Extended spring training. I'm like, dude, hold on a minute. Like, I'm in extended spring training. I'm 24, 23, 24. I got guys that we were doing drills, like how to do a hit and run. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget one of the coaches that was with us. And I can't forget his name for the life of me, but he had 2 kids that are in the big leagues. 2 black kids. One played with the Brewers and one with the Diamondbacks, but I can't remember. I cannot remember their names. But he looks at me. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I have no idea, dude." He's like, "You should be. Aren't you an A ball or this and that?" I'm like, "No." And that was kind of like a red flag. I'm like, I'm doing like some of these kids are young and they're great ball players, but they don't know how to play the game. They don't know how to do a hit and run.
Totally. So that goes back.
But
to
it was shocker. It was like it was shocking. It was shocking to me. I'm like, dude, what am I doing here? Like, I just hit 5 home runs in spring training. I think I hit like 3 something Like, I couldn't have done anything better.
And so that goes back to, there's a lot of things, especially
The factors that I wasn't aware of.
yeah, they're just not in your control. And so, like, I look back and I go into that spring training and I look back now and I'm like, you know, decisions were probably already made prior. And I probably, because I played so well, I probably made the decision tougher. But when you're walking out of the facility for like the last time and you're passing your teammates and they're giving you that look like, why are you going? You know, like, you're a leader, you come from Miami, you just had 2 out of 4 really good seasons, you know what I mean? And so it doesn't make sense a lot of times. And, you know, I've had conversations with other people in the Angels, like, a couple years after, being like, what happened? Trying to get answers, trying to get closure, I guess. And they're like, it was just like a numbers thing. Like, we didn't want to let you go. We actually tried to trade you to, they had a 3-team deal going in between Boston, Atlanta, and the Angels. I think the Angels were trying to get Manny Ramirez, and then, you know, guys like me would be throwing players like in the deal and moving the pieces. And so I guess when the deal fell through, I was supposed to go to Atlanta, and that would have probably been a really good thing for my career because we were stacked top to bottom in the Angels organization. We didn't have a lot of center fielders, which was good because defense was a big part of my game at that point. Probably overshadowed a little bit my hitting. But I think going to the Braves at the time that weren't that good would have been good. But, you know, that stuff like that happens. And thankfully the Cardinals picked me up right away and gave me another opportunity to keep rolling with it.